you're sitting across from someone who spent 20 years mastering their field. They speak with certainty. Their credentials fill a wall, and something in their voice tells you they know exactly what they're doing. That confidence feels reassuring. It's supposed to, but what if the very thing that makes an expert sound authoritative is disconnected from whether they're actually right? Today we're exploring overconfidence bias, one of the most studied phenomena in psychology, and what the research reveals might change how you evaluate every expert opinion you encounter. Here's a finding that stopped me cold. Researchers gave subjects information about a complex case and asked them to make a judgment. Their confidence sat at 33%. Then the researchers gave them more data, more background, more details to work with. That confidence jumped to 53%. The subjects felt dramatically more certain. But here's what matters: their accuracy never budged. It stayed below 30%. More information made them feel more right while leaving them just as wrong. This gap between confidence and accuracy isn't a quirk of one study. It's one of the most robust patterns in the entire psychology of judgment. To understand why this happens, we need to start with what psychologists mean by overconfidence. It's not arrogance, it's not ego, it's a measurement problem built into how human minds work. The overconfidence effect refers to a specific mismatch when your subjective certainty about something reliably exceeds how often you're actually correct. The key word is reliably. We're not talking about occasional mistakes. Everyone gets things wrong sometimes. Overconfidence is when there's a consistent, predictable gap between how sure you feel and how often you're right. And here's what makes this particularly interesting: the effect is strongest precisely when confidence is highest. When you feel most certain, that's often when the gap is widest. The research on this goes back decades. In 1977, Fischhoff, Slovic, and Lichtenstein established the overconfidence effect through careful experimental work that's been replicated hundreds of times since. A major systematic review examined cognitive biases across 4 professional domains: management, finance, medicine, and law. They wanted to know which biases appeared most consistently across these very different fields. What they found was striking. According to this review, overconfidence is the most recurrent bias affecting professional decisions across all 4 domains examined. Not confirmation bias, not anchoring, not availability. Overconfidence, the one bias that cuts across doctors, lawyers, managers, and financial advisors alike. In finance specifically, research shows strong evidence that overconfidence impacts how individual investors make decisions. They trade too frequently, take excessive risks, and overestimate their market timing abilities. Among executives, the pattern is even more consequential. Overconfidence among CEOs directly impacts strategic decisions, acquisitions, expansions, market entries that affect thousands of employees and shareholders. What makes overconfidence so persistent is that it often masquerades as competence. We're trained from childhood to project certainty. Uncertainty reads as weakness. Confidence reads as expertise. Think about how we evaluate professionals. A doctor who says, "I'm fairly confident this is what's happening," sounds less competent than one who says, "Here's exactly what's wrong," even when their actual accuracy is identical. This creates a perverse incentive structure. Professionals who appropriately express uncertainty may be seen as less capable than those who project unwarranted confidence. But here's where it gets more complex. Some researchers argue that overconfidence isn't always a flaw. It might sometimes serve an adaptive purpose. The argument goes like this: in competitive environments, some overconfidence might help people take necessary risks, persist through challenges, and project the confidence that attracts followers and resources. There's something to this. Nobody would start a business, write a novel, or run for office if they accurately calculated their odds of success. Some ventures require believing in yourself beyond what the data supports. But there's a crucial difference between the confidence needed to attempt something difficult and the accuracy required to evaluate outcomes correctly. These are separate problems. We often conflate them. The study I mentioned earlier, where confidence rose from 33 to 53%, while accuracy stayed below 30, reveals something important about how information affects our minds. More data gives us more material to build narratives. We find patterns. We construct explanations. Each new piece of information feels like it adds to our understanding, and in a sense, it does. But additional information doesn't automatically improve prediction accuracy. Sometimes it just gives us more material to construct a wrong answer with greater conviction. This is particularly relevant in fields where feedback is delayed or ambiguous. A surgeon gets immediate feedback, the patient recovers or doesn't. A psychiatrist making a diagnosis might wait years to know if they were right. Financial advisors may never know if their advice was truly optimal, just whether the market happened to move in a favorable direction. Without clear feedback, overconfidence grows unchecked. This brings us to a critical question: can overconfidence be reduced? The research here is nuanced. Some interventions work, but not in the ways you might expect. According to research on cognitive debiasing, merely teaching people that biases exist has appeared insufficient to reduce them. You can't lecture your way out of overconfidence. What does work, according to the research, requires specific conditions, abundant practice, clear outcome measures, task-specific feedback, and perhaps most importantly, genuine admission that learning is needed. A 2025 study published in Nature demonstrated that even a single debiasing training session could reduce confirmation bias in professional risk analysts. The effect was measurable and real. But here's a complicating factor. People who believe themselves less biased than others, a phenomenon called the bias blind spot, are actually more resistant to debiasing training. This creates a troubling paradox. The people most convinced of their own objectivity may be the hardest to help. Their confidence in their unbiased judgment becomes itself a barrier to improvement. Some researchers argue that structural interventions may be more effective than individual training. Rather than trying to fix biased minds, design systems that compensate for predictable human errors. Requiring probability estimates rather than certainty statements, mandating second opinions, creating formal dissent procedures. These structural changes can reduce overconfidence's impact, even when individual bias remains. So what does this mean for you, navigating a world full of confident experts? The first insight is counterintuitive. Be especially skeptical of your own judgment when you feel most certain. That feeling of absolute certainty, I know I'm right about this, is precisely when the gap between confidence and accuracy tends to be widest. High confidence is a warning sign, not a green light. Second, when evaluating professionals, look for calibration rather than confidence. Does this person appropriately express uncertainty, or do they present every statement with equal conviction? A well-calibrated expert will distinguish between what they know confidently, what they're uncertain about, and what lies beyond their expertise. Beware the professional who seems equally certain about everything. Third, and this applies to you personally, knowing about biases isn't enough. The research is clear on this point. Awareness alone doesn't protect you. You need feedback systems. Keep a decision journal. Write down your predictions and your confidence level. Then, and this is the crucial part, go back and check. What did you say would happen? What actually happened? This simple practice reveals your actual calibration. Most people who do this discover uncomfortable gaps between how sure they felt and how often they were right. That discomfort is information. There's one question that researchers have found particularly effective at puncturing overconfidence. Ask yourself, what would have to be true for me to be wrong? This question forces you to generate counterarguments. It breaks the natural tendency to only consider evidence that supports your existing conclusion. It's simple, it's uncomfortable. It works. If you're finding this exploration of cognitive bias useful, subscribing helps us reach more people curious about how their minds actually work. We put out new episodes every week. There's a deeper question beneath all this research. Why would evolution build minds that systematically misjudge their own accuracy? Shouldn't natural selection have fixed this? One theory suggests that moderate overconfidence was adaptive in ancestral environments. The tribe member who confidently claimed they could hunt the mammoth might have been more likely to gain followers and resources, even if they were sometimes wrong. In other words, overconfidence may have evolved not because it improved accuracy, but because it improved persuasion. We didn't need to be right as much as we needed to be followed. If this theory is correct, then overconfidence isn't a bug in human cognition, it's a feature designed for social competition rather than truth-seeking. We evolved to persuade, not to predict. That's an unsettling thought. It suggests that our confidence signals may have evolved specifically to be unreliable indicators of accuracy, because reliable indicators would be less persuasive. Modern research confirms that confident people are rated as more competent, more trustworthy, and more leader-like regardless of their actual accuracy. We're wired to follow confidence. This helps explain why overconfidence is so hard to fix. It's not just a cognitive error we can train away. It's deeply embedded in how humans evaluate and follow each other. Given all this, what's the realistic goal? Probably not eliminating overconfidence entirely. That might not even be desirable. Instead, perhaps, developing meta-awareness, knowing when to distrust your own certainty. In domains where feedback is immediate and unambiguous, surgery, aviation, certain kinds of engineering expertise does correlate with accuracy. Trust confident experts there. But in domains where feedback is delayed, ambiguous, or non-existent, stock picking, psychiatric diagnosis, political prediction, long-term business strategy, calibrate your trust differently. Confidence there tells you less. The overconfidence research invites a kind of intellectual humility that doesn't require becoming paralyzed by uncertainty. You can still decide. You can still act. You can still act. You can still hold beliefs. But you can hold those beliefs more loosely. You can build in space for the possibility that you're wrong. You can seek out disagreement rather than avoid it. You can check your predictions against reality. There's something both humbling and liberating in this research. Humbling because it reveals that the feeling of certainty tells us less than we thought about whether we're actually right. Liberating because it gives us permission to be uncertain. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to pretend to know more than you do. Appropriate uncertainty isn't weakness. It's calibration. The most accurate experts aren't the most confident ones. They're the ones who've learned to notice when their confidence exceeds their evidence and adjust accordingly. Maybe the goal isn't to become more confident. Maybe it's to become more accurate. And sometimes, those two things point in opposite directions.